In this module, we move into some of the more detailed aspects of the Land Valuation Act. In particular, we're going to be looking at the ways that rating valuation is done for some of the special cases, in particular rural land, mining land, large shopping centres even. And we'll also be looking at the question of amalgamating or separating parcels and their impact on value. As you read through this, it's important to take careful note of the provisions that exist. While that's a practical issue that will influence your professional practice, it's also useful for you to take the time to reflect on what these different provisions are saying in terms of their conformity or non-conformity to a consistent valuation approach. It's also useful to reflect on the question of what should be valued as opposed to what is valued, and the question of what is practical to value. And here we see this difficult juggling between unimproved land value versus site value, the question of what unimproved land is really about, what it looks like. Are site works and perhaps fertiliser in the ground contributing to the land value? And while we might have theoretical structures to understand how land tax should be worked out, and we'll be dealing with that in a separate module, the practicalities of how the valuer may actually establish these things needs to be taken into account. And so the Act attempts to juggle between these two almost, well, sometimes conflicting issues. The practicalities of establishing what is pure unimproved land value versus the practicality of the valuer's job. And we can see this to a certain extent in the Queensland legislation. It's also useful, if you're operating in a different state, to also read your own state's comparable legislation and give some thought to how your state has dealt with these issues in a different way. In particular, there are some states that give away the idea of unimproved land value altogether, or capital value, or the different names that it's used, and instead use improved value for their rating and taxing purposes. While this is easy and practical and you can get your values straight from something like RP data, a little thought will show that in fact it causes some rather curious anomalies, and some of these have been studied in some depth where they have existed, such as in Victoria. Take the opportunity to use this module now to become familiar with the details of the Act, and especially that relationship between the details and their interplay with theory and practice.